Hello and welcome to Nature Source Care. My name is Dr. Funda Goldman. I'm a naturopathic physician. And in today's talk, I was going to cover the Navaratna, which are the 9 sacred therapeutic gemstones of Ayurveda or traditional Indian medicine. So let's go ahead. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. For any symptoms that are severe or worsening, please contact a qualified healthcare professional. It is always important to determine the root cause of any disease and to develop a comprehensive treatment plan. Individual cases can vary in terms of treatments that are most effective. Solo therapies may not be appropriate or effective in all cases, so please keep all this in mind as we go ahead. So let's get into a little bit of background about the therapeutic gemstones, especially from an Ayurvedic perspective, and then I'll actually talk about the Navratna. Um, so Ayurveda, if you're not familiar, it's traditional Indian medicine. It's over 5,000 years old. If we break down the word Navratna, Nav means 9 in Sanskrit, and Ratna means gemstone. So Navratna means the 9 gemstones. And so the thing that was in Ayurveda, gemstones and using gemstones as therapeutics are basically seen as these gemstones are crystallized color or crystallized light. So it's sort of, you can think of it as color and or light therapy. The 9 sacred gemstones are related to the 9 planets of classical Indian astrology, also known as Jyotish. And the way the gemstones are used, they're used in different ways. They're used on chakras or the energy wheel centers of the body system. They're used on Marma points, which is basically Ayurvedic acupressure. They're also used on the pulse to shift energies. They are used in places. So comes from Vastu Shastra, which is basically Indian feng shui, if you haven't heard that term. So again, these gemstones can be used in all kinds of situations. They are used, and they are used on different constitutions. So people have different constitutions, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. So wind, fire, earth. There are also different symptoms that are wind, fire, earth, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. There are different days of the week which correspond with the planets. So, like Jupiter is Thursday. Let's see, Sunday is Sun, day of Sun. There's also different energetics with fingers. So, for example, classically, the stone for Jupiter is worn on the index finger. Um, because there are different energetics with the different fingers. They're also used in different seasons. So the energetics of the different gemstones, some are cooling, some are heating. So some stones may be more appropriate. If they're a heating stone, they may be more appropriate during cold weather, like the winter. If they're a heating stone, you probably want to avoid those during the summertime, especially if you tend to be a fiery constitution or have a lot of fire symptoms, so a lot of pitta. So again, all these different aspects of energetics are incorporated, integrated to determine if and when a gemstone may be helpful therapeutically. Now, again, this talk I'm coming from an Ayurvedic standpoint, so a medical standpoint. Um, Gemstones. I'm also, if you don't know, I'm also a Vedic astrologer, so Jyotishi. Jyotish is the name for classical Indian astrology. Um, and so my instructors for Ayurveda and my instructors for Jyotish are different, and they had different points of views on the gemstone. So my Ayurveda instructor, um, he talked about gemstones and used them, I think, pretty widely, um, and didn't seem, except for a few exceptions, didn't seem too concerned about negative effects of gemstones. However, my astrology Jyotish instructors basically, even though they have been used and are used in Jyotish, I was advised not to use them. They classically have been used to help ameliorate the effects, the negative effects of planets. Um, they're called upayas or planetary remedies. But in order to get the best effects of gemstones in Jyotish astrology, you need to know where the stone came from, you need to know the size, you need to know what setting, you need to place the stone in the setting on a certain day You need to chant certain mantras to sort of energize especially if we're talking about jewelry here. Um, all these sorts of details are really critical, apparently. Again, I don't know the details, but that's why my instructors advise not to use gemstones if you're specifically trying to ameliorate effects of the planets. You're much better off using mantra therapy instead of gemstone therapy. Um, Also, I do mention the planets just briefly, so you know, like which, like ruby represents the sun. So there's, I have a little bit, we're calling it Jyotish light, the sort of astrology light layer that I've added here. It may be helpful to you if you want to go down that rabbit hole. It may be helpful to you to visit my other YouTube channel called Light Vedic Astrology. I have a whole playlist on the planets or grahas. Grahas is planets in Sanskrit, where I have talks on each of the planets and everything that they represent. So again, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, I would probably look there because I haven't included that information here because again, it's sort of overlapping and redundant if I go there. But again, this talk, again, highlight, exclamation point, is primarily from an Ayurvedic perspective. So the idea, essentially, what gemstones are, is they're subtle energies and they're used to balance our own energies, and that's how you achieve, re-achieve balance. And there's also this notion of prabhava, or prabhava, which is basically a special effects. Even though some things are made from essentially the same elements, there's some special thing that's generated, some special essence that's created or embedded in that, person or object. So, like these gemstones, I mean, on a certain level, you could think, oh, these are all just a bunch of rocks. It's like, what's the big deal? But the thing is that, some have a little bit more carbon. If you want to, think about it from that sort of chemical point of view, some have more carbon, some have, more oxygen or, sulfur or whatever, whatever the components are of the rocks. That's not my thing, obviously. But even though, two different rocks, gemstones may have essentially the same chemical composition, they still have different, effects. Like maybe they're different colors. Like you can have a very pink amethyst or a very dark amethyst, but they're still both amethyst. So there's still something special, that sort of like unique, essential, subtle quality. And that's what's really creating the therapeutic effect. Okay. So again, that's the whole background. But let's get into the gemstones individually now. So the first Navaratna is ruby, also known as Monica in Sanskrit. So the planet or graha again is the Sanskrit for planet, associated with ruby is the sun. So the doshas, this is the constitution types. So there's Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Vata is wind, Pitta is fire, Kapha is earth. So if you know your constitution is Vata or windy, then this would potentially be a good stone for you. So it decreases Vata. It also decreases Kapha, but it increases Pitta. And the reason why, if you look down below, you'll see the energetics of the stone, which are sweet, pungent, heating, and sweet. So this is a heating stone. So because it's heating, you may not want to wear it in the summer months or use it in the summer months. Also, if you have a lot of pitta, fire in your constitution or in your symptoms, this can increase pitta. Okay. So the therapeutic effects of ruby is that it's life protecting and it provides longevity. And the reason why is sun represents health in general and vitality. It can increase prosperity, concentration, because sun also has to do with the mind, increase mental power. It helps us strengthen the heart. Again, sun represents the heart in Ayurveda and astrology, or classical Indian astrology. So again, if you want to get into, I have again long videos on each planet. That's on my other channel. You can check that out. Those out if you want. Circulation. So again, the sun represents heart circulation. Also, anemia can be helped. It kindles Agni. Agni is a digestive fire, so it helps to improve digestion. And also spleen disorders, especially because the spleen is responsible for generating red blood cells and destroying them to some degree. Um, there's a lot of fire, there's a lot of transformation that happens with the spleen. So, again, that's all sun energy. So, if ruby is not in your budget, or in your price range, there are some alternatives. So, garnet, for example, copper and gold, these have similar energies to ruby. So, you have some alternatives here. The next gemstone is pearl or multi in Sanskrit. Planet that it represents is the moon. The doshas that are affected here, actually, what's nice about pearl is that it's essentially tridoshic. It balances vata, pitta, and kapha. The energetics of pearl is that it's sweet, cooling, and sweet. So, because it's cooling and it's sweet, it's going to cool down pitta. It's going to cool down the fire. It would be better to use pearl, in the warm season as opposed to ruby. So, and also the moon represents the mind. So there's going to be a lot of calming, healing, peace, tranquility. If these are kind of things you want to cultivate, pearl may be a good remedy. Also, gastritis and ulcers, because there's a lot of fire there, the pearl will help to cool that down. Sexual debility. This can be because, again, when things are sweet and cooling, basically they have besides being stabilizing, they have the energetic of being balancing and restorative. And so, usually sexual debility, because the sexual system is kind of the, first thing to go if there's stress on any level, physical or mental, emotional stress, that to get the sexual system back online, you need to really work on stabilizing, building, the whole system, the whole body, mind, heart, spirit complex, to get that back online. So, also, from an Ayurvedic perspective, they talk about rasa, mamsa, shukra, dhatus, which essentially translates to lymph, muscle, and sexual tissues. Alternatives for pearl are moonstone, silver, and bronze. So then we have red coral or powell. This is the planet represented here is Mars. The doshas, it balances vata, it decreases pitta, and it balances kapha. The energetics are sweet, cooling, sweet. So again, because it's sweet, cooling, and sweet, it's going to cool down fire. And Mars is a fiery planet, and it represents things like when there's too much fire in somebody, they can get really angry or hateful, jealous. Mars does represent courage and strength as well. So when we're trying to balance, again, this Pitta energy, fire energy, Mars energy, whichever way you want to think about it, um, we're looking to achieve more gracefulness, poise, as opposed to erratic, fiery, um, kind of reckless, kind of thoughts, behavior, that sort of thing. It also energizes the liver, spleen, and pericardium. It's helpful with ulcers and cholecystitis and inflammation in general because, again, this is a cooling stone. So, alternatives for red coral are carnelian, copper, and bloodstone. So, the next gemstone is emerald or panna. The planet it represents is Mercury. The dosha effects, it decreases vata, wind, it decreases pitta, fire, and it increases kapha, or earth. Um, and the effects here, again, sweet, cooling, sweet. So the therapeutic effects for emerald are it balances the nervous system because, again, Mercury represents especially the peripheral nervous system in Jyotish or classical Indian astrology. And Mercury represents things like writing, speech, intelligence. So maybe I think my instructor even gave this example. If you're looking to write a book or something like that, you might incorporate some Mercury um, into your life somehow. Incorporate some emerald into your life somehow. It's also nutritive and digestive because, again, the sweet, cooling, sweet energetics, it's going to be restorative. It's going to cool things down. Yeah, it's going to slow things down. It's going to ground things. Yeah, especially this energy because Vata is wind. Wind is always moving back and forth. Pitta is fiery. I mean, it's like, that's fire, right? It's like the fire is going on in Canada right now, uncontrollable, unfortunately. Hopefully they are getting a handle on that though. And also spiritual awakening and prosperity. This may be because Mercury can represent things like business, Um, so that may be why prosperity is on this list. And spiritual awakening, because again, spiritual awakening essentially happens through the mind. So, and Mercury represents the mind, but specifically the rational mind. So, again, not to get too deep into the astrology, but I've seen, like, when I've analyzed people's birth charts and stuff, sometimes when people have a very strong Mercury, they can tend towards doing a lot of meditation, and or I tend to find people tend to be interested or deep into Buddhism, because again, Buddhism tends to be a religion, a spiritual path that's very mind oriented, and trying to deal with all the churning of the mind and the redirecting the mind and the thought process and the decision making, which is all represented by Mercury. So alternatives for emerald are aquamarine, peridot, green tourmaline, and brass. So the next gemstone is diamond or Hira. The planet represented here is Venus, and there is a warning not to wear diamond with blue sapphire. We'll cover blue sapphire in one of the next slides. The doshas, this is tridoshic as well, so it balances vata, pitta, kapha, wind, fire, earth. The energetics here are pungent, astringent, heating, and pungent. So, again, if you have a lot of heat and fire, this may not be your first choice, because, anything that's going to give you increased heat, it might increase your heat generally. Um, but you have to consider that in the context of your whole lifestyle and food and season and all that kind of stuff. But the therapeutics here are immunity and rejuvenation. So why would that be? So this, again, Venus as a planet is very similar to the moon in terms of they're both about sensuality and more of like a, I guess we would usually say more of a feminine receiving type of energy where the system slows down. Life is a little bit more in slow motion rather than at like a fast, rapid fire pace. And when you slow down a bit, there's a little bit, well, actually, sometimes there's a lot less wear and tear on your nervous system, your mind, your heart, your spirit. You can just take it a little easy, take a breath, sip your tea mindfully. And so it's a subtle change, but with great effect sometimes. So, immunity and rejuvenation. So, if you're running around frazzled, overworked, that not only wears down your nervous system, but it also depletes you, your immunity. It depletes your adrenal glands. From an Ayurvedic perspective, we would probably use the word ojas. Ojas is it's hard to describe or translate into English, but it's like the subtle liquid or fluid ambrosia like substance that sort of coats and protects the whole body, the cells, and everything. It kind of gives you that glow. When people are truly healthy, happy, satisfied, and they're just sort of beaming light, into, towards everybody else and into the universe. That's because of ojas. When somebody's like running like crazy and trying to keep up and sort of in survival mode, you see it and feel it, from them pretty quickly, pretty easily. So this will help to, again, put you in more of a balanced Venus state where Venus takes her time, right? And Venus represents things like love and art and romance. So these things that take a little time, enjoy the path, right? Enjoy the walk, smell the roses. So, also prosperity, because Venus can represent things like just, the good things in life, right? And so you need time, money, resources to have that happen. It can be spiritually uplifting. So again, when you slow your walk, when you slow your talk, when you take a step back, you have the ability to get more in touch with your spirit rather than being run ragged by the mind. And the mind tends to create these long lists that are never ending, and we try to keep up with it. And so the mind just expects the body to keep up with what the mind wants to do. So again, it's just like, take it down a notch, slow down a little bit. That's kind of the energy here. So again, relationships and marriage can be improved with the stone because Venus represents those things. It helps with the shukra dhatu or the sexual system. So obviously that's usually part of most relationships and marriage. Besides the heart effects, there's the sexual effects. Longevity, premature aging. Well, those are pretty big claims, but again, part of that is just, if you just slow your roll a little bit, slow it down a little bit, and you're not, just how would we describe it? It's like you're not just like wasting your vital force, you're not wasting your vital energy. You're mindful of it. Like, does this thing really require this much mental energy, physical energy? Or can I let this go? Being more mindful about your choices of how you spend your time and energy, your vital force are crucial to, not burning out or crashing out and that sort of thing. And again, art, music, romance, because those are the things that Venus represents. So alternatives for diamond are white topaz and silver. Then we have yellow sapphire or Pushkaraj. The planet Graha represented here is Jupiter. The dosha effects, so it decreases vata, wind, decreases pitta, fire, and it balances kapha, earth. The energetics here, sweet, cooling, sweet. So again, this kind of gets back to, we talked about several stones already that are sweet, cooling, sweet. But clearly there's that, again, Prabhava, sorry, I never pronounce it correctly, Prabhava effect, that special essence juice magic that, again, even though these are probably, they're all rocks, but they're cooling rocks, sweet cooling rocks, there's still different effects from each of them, yeah. So we have the therapeutics are groundedness, stability, wisdom. Those are the things that Jupiter represents. There's also the Meta and Maja Dhatu, so the fat and nervous tissues. Things like atrial fibrillation, because again, atrial fibrillation from an Ayurvedic point of view is a situation where there's usually too much vata. So that's why there's this like almost like spasming of the heart. It can be an electrical thing. It can also be too much pitta or fire because like the heart tissue is irritated, and so that's what gets the nervous system going, or the muscle fibers kind of contracting too fast and desynchronized. And so Jupiter and the stone represent the opposite of that. So just chill, ground, relax, regroup is kind of the energy here. And it also helps to strengthen the heart, liver, kidneys, so the vital organs, to make sure that the whole system, if you have a well balanced infrastructure, that generally helps the whole being, right? Alternatives: yellow topaz, citrine, blue topaz, and gold here. Then we have blue sapphire, or Neelam in Sanskrit. The planet Graha represented here is Saturn. And again, there's this is the other side. So do not wear blue sapphire with diamond. Again, that comes from the lore of Ayurveda. My instructor specifically mentioned that. The doshas and their effects. So blue sapphire decreases vata, wind, it increases pitta or fire, and it balances kapha, earth. The energetics here are pungent, heating, pungent. So we have a different heating stone now. The tissues, the therapeutic effects of this gemstone are mamsa, astidatus, which translate as muscle and bone tissues from Ayurveda. So the muscles are helped, the skeletal system is helped, the joints, arthritis are helped, the nervous system is helped. So emaciation. So, again, when there's too much Saturn energy, somebody's going to be down, depressed, dried up is kind of, when Saturn is too strong or heavy in somebody's life, either chronically or acutely. So the blue sapphire potentially can balance that. Although, frankly, blue sapphire, Saturn is not something, Saturn's a pretty serious planet. So that's not something I typically want to mess around with. So I don't tend to use blue, ever use blue sapphire. I'd much rather use mantras, again, as I mentioned before, but also enlightenment. But if you're willing to go there, this is classically, the classical information about the stone. So also enlightenment, because Saturn represents kind of structure, tradition. It can represent isolation. It can represent things like delays, obstacles, that sort of thing. So it's kind of like if you were to go on retreat or pilgrimage or something, more of a retreat than a pilgrimage. If you went off to an ashram or something like that, that's very much like a Saturn type energy, because you're just sort of like getting away from the hubbub, the hurly burly pace of life, and sitting quietly by yourself, tuning in, So again, if you're okay with blue sapphire and Saturn, go for it. Again, I would rather make sure that I don't create more imbalance with Saturn because Saturn's pretty heavy duty. But alternatives for blue sapphire, amethyst, lapis lazuli, iron, and lead. Then we have Hessonite or Gomed in Sanskrit. The planet or graha represented here is Rahu, which is the north node of the moon. The dosha effects here, it decreases vata, wind, it increases pitta, fire, and it balances kapha, earth. The energetics here are sour, heating, pungent. The therapeutic values here, it can help improve spleen function, muscle fatigue, attention deficit, digestion, circulation. The north and south node of the moon, they're a little bit um, unusual. Hidden, that's the energy of them. So this seems like sort of a random list, but let's just go with it. Lymphatic congestion, edema, also Rakta Mamsa, Dhatus, which translate as blood and muscle tissues, helps to improve complexion and also helps to balance the third chakra, which is involved in empowerment, courage, and self-esteem. So alternatives with Hessonite are agate and lead. Then the final gemstone with the Navratna, but I do have an extra bonus gemstone for you. So hold on for that. But cat's eye, also known as Vaiduria or Lasnya in Sanskrit. The planet or graha represented here is Ketu, the south node of the moon. The dosha effects here is it decreases vata, wind, increases pitta or fire, decreases kapha, earth. The energetics are pungent, heating, pungent. The therapeutic effects are this can be used for allergies, colds, congestion, so infectious disease, or acute disease, that sort of thing, asthma, so lung, respiratory system, kidney function. It's also used for protection from negative energy from others. So this is actually suggested, like if you're somebody who works with the public, or you're a healer, or you're empathic, or something like this. This might be a stone to kind of help protect you from the energies of others, especially if you're sensitive to that. Also, diabetes and arthritis can be helped with this stone. But again, diabetes, you have to watch your carbs, right? And, exercise, that sort of thing. So this gemstone alone will not cure your diabetes, but, it can be helpful. Alternatives for cat's eye are turquoise and lead. And then this was the bonus stone. Again, it's not a classic Navratna, but it's something I use all the time. And it's known as the all-purpose stone. And it was actually advised to me, like when in doubt, like if all the energetics and all the things I've mentioned so far, it's like confusing, like which one do I use? It's like, I have a lot of pitta, but it's winter time, like which one? Um, you can't really go wrong with amethyst. So that's why I included that one here. The Sanskrit name is Mila Spatika. The planet or graha represented here is Saturn. The doshas, it's tridoshic, so it balances Vata, Pitta, Kapha, wind, fire, earth. The energetics here are sweet, cooling, sweet. And as I mentioned, this is the all-purpose stone. It helps to balance the crown chakra, which is again the chakra that represents our connection with the divine. It helps with mental clarity. It helps with prosperity. It kind of gets the whole being. Again, you can't kind of go wrong with it. It helps with the neuromuscular weakness. It improves dignity, love, compassion, hope, all these really high-minded spiritual qualities that some of us aspire to. It helps to control emotions because, again, there's this kind of spiritual effect of it. So sometimes our emotions kind of cloud our spiritual connection. There's the Majadati or the nervous system, the nervous tissue. And again, protection of all kinds. So, I mean, I've been advised in so many ways to use amethyst. So, actually, in the clinic, I usually have some amethyst either on me or in my drawer or something like that. Because again, people come with all kinds of, energies. They're not always like, really nasty, evil energies, but, disease and anxiety and depression and worry. I mean, these are all energies. And so it's like, um, again, I just want to make sure that I'm not thrown off balance because of the people I'm trying to help to helping them to rebalance. So you can use this on yourself, as like jewelry or something like that, or a stone you keep by your bed. It's also used for things like protecting your home. So, I've been advised to put an amethyst, in different corners of my home, especially if it's a square home, one in each corner can be helpful. It's also a traveler stone. So when you're out of your home and out of your element and you're traveling and, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever, kind of life and travel brings up, this can be helpful with smoothing over the effects of any of that stuff. So again, when in doubt, amethyst. Yeah. So there you go. The Navratna, nine sacred therapeutic gemstones of Ayurveda. So hopefully this gives you not just a start, but especially the energetics and that kind of detailed information, especially if you're deep into Ayurveda, deep into gemstones. This will hopefully be helpful, useful to you, and interesting, if nothing else. So, thank you for your time as always. I wish you all the best. Again, if you're more interested in like going down the rabbit hole of astrology, I do have another YouTube channel, Light Vedic Astrology. You can get more information on the planets and their effects there. Um, so until next time, take care. Namaste.